welcome to our labor economics section. So it's titled The Markets for Factors of Production and Labor Economic Issues. This is the point in the course where I actually make the pitch for those who find economics interesting to perhaps consider becoming an economics major. Two reasons. One, by this point in the course, you've had a fair amount of material, even if this is your first economics course. And second, some of what we're going to show you really applies to this section of labor economics. So some of the benefits, a lot of the courses are challenging and make you think, also useful in the real world. So very high demand for graduates with economic majors, and I certainly think, my personal opinion, you work way too hard and way too many hours in life to make money your sole concern when finding a career. That's my opinion. But if you do enjoy something, more money is always better than less money. The nice thing is there is a high demand for graduates with economics majors. So looking at salaries for graduates, have two different charts. This is a 2008 chart, shows economics third out of this list behind computer science and engineering. This is actually a chart from a textbook, a very new textbook, so it's in chart format, but it shows economics 2 actually just behind computer engineering. Breaks out starting salaries a little lower than, say, computer engineering, electrical engineering, or computer science, mechanical engineering, but mid-career catches up a little bit, and then 10 to 20 years, it actually moves up to second on this list. So you can do well with an economics major financially. If you're interested in graduate school, economics majors also tend to do well on both the LSAT, that's the law school entrance exam, and GRE, graduate record exam, is exam to get into most doctoral programs. Shows economics is 4. I've seen other lists. I mean, different people who compile different lists, they tend to show slightly different results. But on almost all of them, economics is close to the top. The type of analytical reasoning you do with an economics course is beneficial for a lot of these graduate school or law school entrance exams. So if you are interested, feel free to shoot me an email or stop by. Let me know, if you have any questions. I'd be more than happy to answer them. So, why do we make that pitch there? Well, part of what you saw in the salary comparison makes it quite clear. And in fact, if we move back a little bit, what a lot of people will say, and even in macroeconomics, you talk about the labor market. Like, what is the unemployment rate? How is the labor market doing? As if it's one market, but it is absolutely not one market. If you look at this chart, it's completely obvious that people with computer science degrees are not in the same market as people with English or journalism degrees. This is completely different markets. And these fields command completely different salaries because of that. So the idea that there's one labor market isn't reality. There's many labor markets. There's labor markets for computer programmers and people who are going into the finance industry, and people who want to work in radio broadcasting, and for biologists and chemists and engineers and public school teachers and everything you can think of. It's a completely, they're just different markets. So this section starts to look a lot at what are some of the things that affect demand, what are some of the things that affect supply, what are some of the things that affect incomes, whether incomes will be increasing or decreasing over time, and some myths of whether incomes have increased or decreased over time, and just a whole lot of different subfields within earnings and the factors of production and labor. It's kind of a fun section. I mean, this is an immensely complex topic that we're covering very briefly in a principles course. If you are interested in this topic, there are a whole lot of other ways that you can gain. So, principle of marginal productivity. A couple different terms you'll need to know. The marginal physical product of an input. This is the increase in output that results from a 1 unit increase in the use of an input, holding other inputs constant. Now, for labor economics, what this really usually means is how much more output will we get when we hire one more worker? Or perhaps if we have, how much more output will we get if we have a worker work one more hour? Going back to the example for pizza. So your Domino's Pizza, you decide to hire one more worker. How many more pizzas will you be able to produce? Right? This is a pretty relevant question. That is the marginal physical product. The marginal physical product would show how much more pizza the firm would be able to produce when they hire that one extra worker, or perhaps have a worker working one extra hour. That's an important question. The marginal revenue product is actually the more important question for a firm, right? The firm doesn't really care in the end. It doesn't care about what it produces. We know the firm has one goal. You should know this by now. The firm's goal, make as much money as they can possibly make. So it's not really producing the extra pizzas that really matters for Domino's. It's how much more money are they going to bring in by hiring the worker that will allow them to produce those extra pizzas. So the marginal physical product is important, but the marginal revenue product is really the important thing to look at here. If you hire a new worker, how much more money will they bring in? And if you're thinking of this from a worker, that's the reason the firm's going to hire you, right? Firms are not hiring anybody because they're nice. They want to hire a person because they would expect that individual is going to make them more money. Or perhaps if you're not really on the revenue side, you need to, you may be complying with a regulation or cost savings, but firms have to, these are the questions firms hire. Firms hire people because they think that person will help in their goal of making as much money as possible. The marginal revenue product, you hire a worker, how much more output do you get? That's the how much money per unit of output, marginal revenue product. Okay, we have this example here where we have the input, the output that's associated with that input, and the price per unit of the product. What I want you to do is pause this, jot this down, and figure out, before you continue, ideally, what is the marginal physical product and what is the marginal revenue product. So go ahead and pause now to complete this. Okay. Hope you've completed this, taken a shot at it. Here's the chart filled in. So the marginal physical product, it's the extra output when you add an input. So when you go from 1 unit to 2 units, you go from 1 unit of output, 1 to 2 units of input, so say 1 worker to 2 workers, or 1 hour of work to 2 hours of work, you increase the number of products you make from 1 to 3. Well, the marginal physical product is 2. When you add that third worker, or the third hour of work, you go from 3 to 6 units of output produced. The marginal physical product's 3. You add the fourth worker or hour of work, you get 10 more units of output. Marginal physical product's 4. And so on through here. At a price of $5 per unit, the marginal revenue product is simply the marginal physical product times the price. So we have 5, 10, 3 times 5, 15. Our high gets to be 25. And then it starts to drop as our marginal physical product starts to drop. So the marginal revenue product, as we mentioned, this is going to be what we end up caring about most, right? What's the extra money that's brought in from 1 extra unit of input? 1 extra hour of labor, how much more money does the firm bring in? So in a competitive market, what's the profit maximizing rule? The profit maximizing firm will buy or hire the quantity of any input at which the marginal revenue product equals the price. Right? The firm makes money when they hire a worker because the worker produces more output for the firm. Well, if the worker produces more output for the firm, they sell those items. That's the marginal revenue product, right? The value of the extra items the worker produces. What would the firm pay? Well, the firm will keep hiring extra workers as long as the extra money they bring in exceeds the price they have to pay the worker. So, marginal revenue product of labor, increase in the employer's total revenue that results when it hires that additional unit of labor. Right? This is just the marginal revenue product, but we're just saying now specifically for labor. If the marginal revenue product of labor exceeds the wage, what should the firms do? Well, we just talked about this. The firm should keep hiring more workers. Right? If hiring a worker is going to bring you in $100 and the worker costs $50, it's pretty common sense. You hire the worker. You make more money by hiring that extra worker. If, however, the marginal revenue product of labor is less than the wage, what should firms do? Well, here's the opposite. Firms should cut back on the number of workers they have. They certainly shouldn't hire the next worker, but in fact, it's often profitable for the firm to let go of workers because the output from the worker isn't worth it. The firm would lose money in this case. So this is a good way to think about how do firms maximize profits. It's not a bad way to think about what do you contribute to the firm. Why would a firm choose to hire you? The firm should choose to hire you because you make money for the firm. So thinking personally, what can you do to make sure the firm sees you as earning a lot of money for them? That's not a bad thing to keep in the back of your mind when you're thinking about job applications and all of that fun stuff. So we shift gears, as we're going to do several times in the labor economics section, to the determination of rent. So when we talk about rent here, what we are going to be talking about is economic rent. So economic rent, we start with the idea of rent for land. So land as a factor of production has a special feature in that the quantity is constant. Well, what does the quantity constant mean? So the market for land looks quite a bit different, right? The supply of land is roughly constant, which is different than most of our supply curves. So the supply curve is essentially a vertical line. Well, that has pretty big implications because usually the supply curve is upward sloping, which means if demand increases, yes, the price will go up, but because some extra firms will jump into the market, the price doesn't go up as much as it otherwise would increase. But when you see a demand increase in the market for land, you see a significant jump strictly in the price, right? We can't, the supply isn't, quantity supplied can't go up because there's roughly a fixed amount. Well, same is going to happen if you see a decrease in demand, only just the opposite case where the price will drop. The implications of this are pretty huge. You could see very volatile swings in the price of land, but this isn't a section devoted to the economics of land, it's labor economics. The issues with land and the extra rents you would have to pay, though, are quite applicable to our study of labor economics and why do some people earn the wages that they earn. So what do we mean by economic rent? Well, it's the portion of earnings of a factor of production that exceeds the minimum amount necessary to induce that factor to be supplied. So really, land is there already. What would you need to supply land, to rent land out if you're not using it? It would probably be quite little, right? Just enough to cover your administrative costs. However, given that land is in fixed supply, often you can get quite a bit more than nothing to rent land or to rent available office space. In some areas, you can get considerable amounts of money by renting land, renting buildings. Now, this is not the section on real estate, though, right? We're in the section of labor economics. So how does this apply? Well, we call this rent seeking or economic rent seeking. Just a word of caution, rent seeking also applies to something else within economics, so it's a little confusing. Rent seeking also applies to the case where a firm will engage in unproductive activities. Say unproductive activities to win a big prize. So the government offers a grant Well, a lot of firms have to send in an application to try to win the grant. That's not really a productive activity for the firm. That's called rent seeking. This is a little bit different, and it's getting economic rents. So it's not exclusive to land. Take a moment, think here, what kind of workers collect economic rents? Because they have something that's in fixed supply. They get a lot more money than perhaps they really need to work that particular job. So you can pause this if you want to take a moment to think about it. As far as who gets economic rents, really anybody who has some special skill that's somewhat unique. If it's unique, then obviously others don't have the skill. It doesn't have to be unique, it could just be rare. But a rare skill that others can't duplicate, or not many can duplicate, and they get more money because of it, they collect rents. Commonly, we would think of it happening with pro athletes or movie stars. So think about, for example, LeBron James. I don't know exactly what his earnings are, but let's say it's $80 million a year. I think that's ballpark about what he might make between his NBA contracts and all of the advertising money that he gets. So with $80 million a year, if it weren't for basketball, what might LeBron James be earning right now? Well, he's in his mid to upper 20s. What might he earn from an outside job? Well, if he's really a superstar, I mean, he seems pretty bright, but $100,000 is probably the high end for your average, say, upper person in their upper 20s. If basketball ceased to exist, and say LeBron James had gone through the normal, like quote unquote normal, getting a college degree and going into the business world or something like that, $100,000 would be pretty optimistic on what any person in their late 20s makes. But we'll just use that for comparison. Well, if that's then what it would take to play basketball is $100,000. If it takes $100,000 to get LeBron James to play basketball, but instead he makes $80 million, really he gets $79.9 million of his salary, we would think of as economic rent. Money because there's one LeBron James, and that LeBron James there's nobody else. There's no other him. And he makes a lot of money because of that, right? We'd think of that as economic rents. There's a fixed supply, so when the demand goes up, that happens. You'll see this in you could almost think of economic rents as a superstar effect, so you'd see it in journalism and movie stars, and there are even academics who, you could charge a lot of money for speeches, right? You could think of that as rent seeking. They may not need quite that much to do it, but because there's a superstar effect, they get that much to do this. So once again, the next shift. Let's talk about some wage and income trends within the United States. So real wages and income. Real wages have remained about the same over the last 30 years. But real hourly compensation has continually increased. Let's look at this particular chart. The hours per week has continually dropped. Now this hours per week is both hours at a workforce and work at home. It's dropped, right? People have more leisure time today than they've had in the past. Hourly wages, notice they go up kind of on a nice little line here. They seem to go up on a nice little line, and then starting in the late 60s, straight. And in fact, you see it even a downward dip here for a while. Why has this happened? Well, there's a number of reasons why, but the big thing to note is while wages have remained stagnant, compensation hasn't. So if you look at this line, the blue line that's going up, it keeps going up if you start to consider compensation. Now, compensation would be things like health benefits, retirement plans, anything that the firm provides that's not wages, that's kept going on this upward trajectory. Why? Well, there's a bunch of reasons. A big one in the U.S. is tax implications, tax reasonings. It's often you can get tax benefits by providing compensation instead of wages, so you can provide more, and firms do that. But the idea, if you mention that wages have remained constant, or if you hear a politician saying the income for Americans has not been going up, and this is something that is terrible and firms are being greedy, or whatever they say. Politicians will say a whole lot of things, as we all know. Well, they're not technically lying, right? Wages have remained constant, but it's certainly not the whole story, as compensation had gone on the same upward trajectory. Now, in the last few years, when the Great Recession has hit, wages, compensation itself might have even leveled out. But overall, compensation levels have kept going up, even over these past 30 years, where people will say we have an issue where the average person hasn't been getting more money. Now, there's also another claim that's made about median income. So, what will the middle income family earn? Well, this is a table from a book by Connard, and this chart that's in here, all the data is from the Census Bureau. You see 1980 income and 2005 income. So what this chart ends up showing is the median incomes for white men, non-white men, white women, and non-white women. The first thing to preface here, if you look at the median household income, and for those who've had statistics, you'll know this. For those who don't, median is the middle. So if you had 100 families, the median income is the income of the family that's right in the middle, where half are above, half are below. The median income in the U.S. has dropped over the past 15, 20 years. However, if you look at this chart, the median income of white men has gone up. The median income of non-white men has gone up. The median income of white women has gone up, and the median income of non-white women has gone up. This is every subgroup, right? I mean, that's 100% of the workforce. So how could median incomes be stagnant? However, you'd see this increase in all four wage groups. Well, the key is these percentages, right? The percentage of workers in all four of these. You notice that you have more people, the workforce now consists more of the groups that were making less, particularly non-white men and non-white women now make a much larger share. We've had a lot of immigrants into the workforce as well. And with a huge influx of immigrants into the workforce, we would expect those individuals are going to likely be on the lower end of the wage scale. Well, because of that, that's going to pull median incomes down. So have median incomes dropped? Well, on the overall statistics, yes. If you hear a politician claiming median household income has dropped, well, that's not lying. But if you've ever heard the phrase, there's lies, damned lies, in statistics, this would be the case. A number of issues with this. Household size has dropped. So if you say household income has been dropping, well, yes, but so is the size of the households. And actually, if you control for that, it pretty much covers, you find that the effect really isn't there anymore. The issue of compensation still rising. We saw what this happened, so focusing just on income might not be relevant. Also, once you start by demographic groups, you realize that a big chunk of this median income dropping is that we've had a lot of individuals enter the workforce who are earning lower income levels. Because of that, that's going to drop the median downward. So once again, the idea that median incomes have dropped, technically true. It doesn't really contain that much information, though. On average, households have been getting wealthier over time. So the claim that people are doing terribly really isn't quite true.